This is no BA, I assure you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go and spend
Maybe not the
150
people
grand.
in the Brown School of Social Work.
Yes, I'm going to go and spend 150 grand, so that I can.
We're recording now, just FYI.
Oh,
Just FYI. And not that you all would say anything inappropriate, but I just wanted to know.
Okay, all right.
All right. I would like to call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are any of our candidates here?
Yes, the first
Two of them are, perfect. All right, so Sandy, would you send Aaron in, please?
Wait, did I get a pen?
Everybody have the sheet?
You have to pull it, yeah, you have to pull the little piece off the end.
Got it.
we got a fancy pen.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no,
can I
it's
Thank you.
important stuff.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
I'm Amy Clendenin. I'm the board president. You want to go around and introduce yourselves, despite the fact that we have name tags.
Okay,
We'll
yes,
just say
thank you.
Hey, Matt, will you push the door? It's an open meeting. We push that.
Would you want to just do the side one? That way the sound doesn't
That's
go
fine.
down there.
Whatever.
This is the important stuff.
Sorry, Aaron.
I'm Alex Kahn.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Christine Keller, and I think our kids might be in high school together.
They are, yes, hi.
Joe Dowell, I think you were in Stay and Play with my kids. when
Years
they
and
were-
years ago, I think you're
Really,
right.
really long time
It's
ago.
been a long time ago, yes.
John Simpson, superintendent.
I'm David Addison.
All right. I think we have allotted 20 minutes per candidate, so I'm going to set a timer just so that I remember to pay attention to time. And, I don't know how much John or anybody has informed you about what the process is going to look like, but we're just going to go around and we each have a question that we're going to ask you, and then take as much time as you need within the 20 minutes, and then if we have additional time, we might ask you other questions. Great. Okay? So, Joe.
Are we going in order?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you see as challenges facing the district?
I think one of the big challenges that I see that I'm passionate about is equity in education. I think that in all districts, not just Webster Groves, I think there is a gap. I don't think I know there is a gap in accessibility and in performance, and I think it's important that we do the work as employees and as adults and as board members to do everything that we can to close that gap so that gap doesn't exist. And I mean, as far as ability and race and equity across the board. That is, I work currently for an independent all-girls middle school in the city with a mission of overcoming poverty through education. And it's a really pretty cool place. All of our girls are below the poverty line, and about 90% of them are Black, about 5% of them are Hispanic, and then the rest are white. And most of these kids come in 2 grade levels behind and leave a grade level ahead. By the time they're done with middle school, it's 5th through 8th grade. And so I think I have some experience in working with kids and staff and parents to close some of those gaps. And I think that social justice piece and that equity and education piece is something that I could offer.
Awesome.
All right. What is your primary reason for wanting to be on the board?
I am a longtime member of the community. I've lived here for nearly 20 years now. I have 3 children who have gone through all levels of the school district, starting at ECEC, now Ambrose, all the way through. I have one in college, so one who's graduated from high school. No intention to leave Webster Groves after my kids are gone, so having a strong school district is important as a resident, as a taxpayer, as a parent, all of the above. I've been in education for most of my career, and so I am passionate about the field of education, and I like to be involved on all different levels, and so this is a way that I can be involved in my own community.
Thank you. What personal strengths or talents do you think you would contribute as a member of the board?
Communication, I think, is a big one. As a school counselor, I am used to talking to people all the time. I connect well. I'm good at seeing other people's perspective. I work well as a group. I'm a good team member. I'm a doer. I am good at getting things done, making things happen. I can come up with ideas and work together with groups to make big things happen.
How would you describe the relationship between a school board member and a member of the staff?
I think the school board member and a member of the staff would be collegial to an extent. I don't think that as a school board member, it is not our job to hire and fire. It would be a school member's job to approve what's recommended by other administrators or superintendents. So I think support would be the biggest support on all levels. I think that having a quality school district comes from having quality staff, and I think having quality staff happens when you have support from all different levels. And teachers and administrators and everybody feel like they can do their job. I think people feel like they can do their job best when they're getting support from the community and from everybody involved.
I'm going to kind of reframe because your answer to Joe's question was sort of the answer to mine.
Okay.
So I'm just going to kind of reframe my question. What are some of your suggestions for dealing with some of the equity issues in the district?
I think accessibility is a big thing. I think accessibility not to just the education pieces, but to extracurricular, to information, to parent connection. I think that even in Webster Groves, where we have all kinds of sports activity and music and theater and all kinds of awesome language opportunities and travel opportunities and so many different cool things that kids can be involved in. When you go to many of the programs in Webster Groves, you see a predominantly white population, and you see a predominantly typically developing population. And so it would be ideal, I think, if everything that the Webster District offered could be accessible, and some of that may come from doing some real work to get into communities maybe where families of color are predominantly in Webster. Some of it may be promoting activities among special education groups, among different populations within the district. I think it needs to be a really intentional activity. It's not just putting the word out and saying it's open to everybody. I think it has to be intentional.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to take a leaf from Keita's book, and because it's clear what you're passionate about. So this role is to until April, until the election April. What do you think you can accomplish with regard to your area of passion between now and April?
I think that I come with a wealth of, if we're talking specifically about my area of passion, I think I come with a wealth of information and a wealth of professional development and experience with seeing kids who have, even in my own family, I'll use my family as an example in this one. I have 3 very different children, and I have one child who had IEPs throughout school. So I worked as an advocate for him. I also worked at St. Louis Children's Hospital for a while, for 7 years, so longer than a while, doing developmental testing. And so I understand educational need, and so I think my hope would be to encourage engagement from populations that maybe aren't as engaged as they could be. That would be my hope.
Okay. At this point, we will open it up to any other questions that board members may have. You can choose from the list, or you can just wing it. That's fine. Peter.
How do you think public education today is different than when you were in school?
Oh my goodness, the opportunities that are available for kids here compared to what I had growing up is just remarkable. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, so a smaller town. And we had music, and we had theater, and we had sports. And I think occasionally some of the language classes took some trips. But in my kids' experiences here, my oldest son went to Ecuador. My middle guy has gone to China and France, and will be going to Italy and Greece this year. Just the travel opportunities alone, the opportunities through the Chelsea Center, which I don't know if that's still called the Chelsea Center. I know there's been some changes in that. But the opportunities to find internships and pursue passions that are not just curriculum-based passions is just remarkable. That's one of the things that I love about the Webster District, and that's one of the things that I think makes us stand out as a district is the access to opportunities outside of just curriculum-based opportunities. I also think academically, the academic rigor, some of the classes that my kids have taken, it wouldn't have existed at all in my school, in high school. I think growing up, I was in a school that had pretty much basic social studies, math, language arts, science, but not all of the variety of. I remember when we very first toured the high school years and years ago, before any of my kids even went to the high school, seeing the automotive shop and thinking, oh my goodness, like, it's in a high school? It's amazing.
For sure.
So you've done various things just in terms of volunteer activity
Yes.
in the school district. For the volunteer activity for the school district, what's been the most meaningful thing you've done there in your opinion?
The Equity and Education Committee, just because that fits in with that's my career, that's where a lot of my focus is. I think I learned the most, and this was many years ago, but I was on the Strategic Planning Committee when I worked for Parents as Teachers for a couple of years, and I think that was eye-opening just into the work that it takes to set a vision statement and a mission statement and all of the details on strategic planning that I was not aware of. So I think that I learned a tremendous amount from that. Much of my volunteer work for the district has shifted as my kids have aged. When they were younger, I did more of the PTO kind of stuff, and I am not as interested in that at this point, nor are they as interested in me doing that at this point. So, and same with classroom type stuff. I did much more of that when they were younger, and at this point, I think more of a global work would be a better fit. So.
Erin, what is your understanding of the role of a school board member?
I think a school board member works, school board works as a unit, and I think it's kind of checks and balances, making sure that everything that allows for optimal learning for a student is in place, and that goes from budget to curricula to facilities, all of the pieces with, I think, the center always being the student and optimal learning.
Anybody has anything else with us?
Does she get to ask us questions?
She does, but we have a time for one more question if anybody has one, otherwise, okay. What questions do you have for us?
I have a few questions, I guess.
Okay.
One of my first questions would be, as a school board, are you all on multiple committees, or do you choose one or two committees within this? Like, when I'm thinking about the individual committees, like strategic planning and like equity and education, and what are the expectations as far as that? Is that something that?
Anybody? Can
So,
answer?
last year I served on, I think, 3 committees.
Okay.
And it sort of worked with others to sort of kind of spread ourselves out among them.
Okay.
My understanding is the strategic planning committee that we all serve
Everyone
on that
is on
one.
that, okay.
Mhm. And then beyond that too, I serve as a liaison to a city, each of
Okay.
us do, and a city that we serve.
Okay.
And a school or two. And
Okay.
usually it's the school which your child attends.
Okay, okay.
Am I missing anything there, David?
That I can think of. I guess, is the question more related to what's the commitment you're being asked to make here?
I think that's my question, yeah, just what is, I guess that and division, does everyone do everything, or is it divided? Okay.
No.
I think that's more my question.
So
like-
let me give you my perspective. I
Okay.
think early on, there's a lot that you have to do just because it's
To get up to speed.
nothing is sort of familiar. I mean,
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, this is new to going to be new to almost anybody. I mean,
Right,
we have a few people who sort of come to the odd school board meeting prior to running for election and things like that, but it's certainly all new, and so there's a lot of things that are sort of very different. Alex can perhaps sort of fill you in terms of what that's like. I would say early on there's a lot more. It's more of a commitment of time.
in the early end, yes, okay.
But fundamentally, it's as much time as you want to put in. So,
Okay.
I mean, there's an expectation you read everything that's sent
Mhm.
out to you, and you're familiar with the questions, so that then we can move efficiently
Right.
when we're doing things here. Most of the things you're going to go to, I mean, especially if you're a liaison for the schools where your child is there or you've got another interest in things like
Okay.
that. If you're on committees, you volunteered probably for committees that are of more interest to you. I mean, I'm liaison to
Right.
the Finance Advisory Committee because everybody knows I'm a nerd. But, it's
Right.
things like that. So whilst there is, I probably these days spend, and it's a little more because Amy and I, as president, vice president, I probably spend between 10 and 15 hours a week on, it's probably not even, it's probably near 10 hours a week on sort of school board related stuff, much of which is sort of reading and then sort of things like that.
Right. And then another of my questions was about being a liaison to schools, how that works. So I think you've answered that. My intention, or my hope, I think, would be to continue this beyond April. Is that the expectation of the school board, that whoever is in this place, or is that not an appropriate question?
That is
It's-
a
Okay.
completely appropriate question.
Okay.
I think that obviously anybody who serves in this position for some amount of time before April will have an advantage, perhaps in terms of
Running
name
for,
recognition,
right.
but also more importantly in terms of having had a taste of what the job is and just having a head start in terms of getting up to speed.
Absolutely.
So I think that's, perfectly
Okay.
appropriate, yeah.
I think those are all my questions at this point.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Can
coming.
I go back to that room and?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you
At
very
8
much for
o'clock
taking the
or
time to
shortly
come.
thereafter, when we're done interviewing and the board processes, we'll
Okay.
invite you back in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Aaron.
So, just a matter of protocol, in terms of any discussion we have prior to whatever voting we're doing, does that need to be in open session?
Yep.
Okay, I thought that was the case. I just wanted
Yep.
to understand. And is the expectation that all of the candidates will be back as we have those discussions?
It's their
It's up to
choice.
them, so
Okay,
let's
alright.
assume that they will.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wanted to understand how those
Yeah.
things work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can either, did you prepare forms for us to lay out?
Not.
So do you guys want to, we can either say 1, 2, 3 and state the names out loud, or if we feel self-conscious doing that, we can write it down, but we still have to put our names on it, so they're gonna know how we voted. Does anybody feel like we need to write that down, or are we comfortable saying 1, 2, 3?
I would suggest we're better off if everybody writes it down themselves. We can then read them out afterwards. That way nobody's looking and saying, hang on, Christine voted for this person, so
Okay.
I need to go do the same.
That's a good point.
I'll get that taken care of.
Yeah, so if we
So-
could just get maybe like, however many, 6 sheets of
Yep.
paper. we can do that. Hi, Joel, how are you?
Good evening.
Do you know everybody? We introduced ourselves before. Has everyone?
I mean, you can all introduce yourselves again if you want,
I'm
but I don't
Amy.
think you need
I'm the
to.
board president.
It's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
Not need to do that.
Okay.
Thank you all for having me here tonight. I appreciate it.
So the way this is going to work, we are going to take turns asking you a question.
Okay.
We're asking everybody the same questions. And then I am putting you on a timer starting now.
Okay.
So we have a total of 20 minutes. And if we have time after you've answered, we may ask additional questions that we might have read from a list, or we might just make them up. And
Okay.
then I will leave 5 minutes for you to ask us questions at the end.
Great.
All right, so, Joe.
What do you see as challenges facing the district, and what suggestions do you have for dealing with those?
For dealing with those? It's a good question.
Two-part question.
So I think that the district, from my view, is at a great spot right now. I mean, if you look over time, there's a lot of really good things happening, which is wonderful. It's, if you look historically, there's a lot of good stuff going on. So I think the obvious issue right now is redistricting is tough. I think that if you look at the data for any district in a board, it's a hard issue to get over. So in the short term, I think that's it. I think that getting over the bond issue and working with our space issues was a huge hurdle to get over, which is a huge testament to where we're at. So I think in the short term, it's getting through the redistricting exercise, which can be tough, and I think you guys have done a good job so far with the committees you've assembled, and I think hiring an outside firm to lead that effort was really smart. So that's how I'd see getting through that.
Thanks. What's your primary reason for wanting to serve on the board?
Yeah, so, obviously having been on the board before, I think gives an interesting view that you all obviously have. I think it's an incredibly hard position to fill. I think that when it opened up, my immediate concern was for how does anybody fill this position really in service to the district in really a selfless way? In candor, I didn't know if I'd ever run for the board again after my first term. That's a question I still haven't answered, quite frankly. I think, but for the huge issue that you guys have in front of you to deal with, it would have been a little less of a crucial item. I think anybody that comes into this position is, as you guys all know, it's a 6 to 12 month learning curve to really get in a groove. So I think to have a 6-month opening and to try to have somebody fill that void with no experience really doesn't give you guys much of a resource to lean on. It's somebody just figuring out what to do for 6 months, and then to have the benefit of saying that they're running for re-election in April. I know I haven't worked directly with all of you in the past, but have with some of you, I'm a pretty open book. I'm a pretty known quantity. There's not a whole lot of guessing with what you're getting with me. And really the hope was, how could I be a continued resource to the district? I mean, after I left the board, I've been serving through the foundation for the last 3 years, and we've really realigned the thing in honestly a pretty amazing way. And I just want to make myself a tool the district could use in a hard spot. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. What personal strengths or talents do you think you would you contribute as a member of the board?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that the real struggle in this position is the short fuse on the position. You know, I think that if it was somebody coming in to fill the 2.5 years that are left, it would be a very different dialogue. You know, my history, for those of you that don't know, is I spent 8 years on the board of another nonprofit education group before I joined the school board, and then did a term on the school board, and then have been leading the foundation for the 3 years since then. So I think that I could be deluding myself, but I believe that I could hit the ground running pretty quick, you know, and really the effort would be being a resource to the rest of you and not an impediment. I think that 6 months, or really about 5.5 months now, will go by extremely fast, and you guys need somebody that can really be a resource and not a roadblock. So my hope would be my history, my past, the fact that I'm still really engaged in district issues would be allow me to kind of hit the ground running pretty quick. So that'd be my hope.
Thanks.
How would you describe the relationship between a school board member and a staff member and or an administrator?
I mean, my view has always been extremely clear that a school board member is engaged in the governance of the district. You know, you're really not an individual. You're one of 7 people that, you know, at the end of the day you have your own opinion, but you need to speak pretty collectively. You know, my everyday job is a real estate developer, which translates really well into a board setting, because my professional job is to not be the best at anything. My job is to employ and rely on really smart people every day. So I do every day of my life. I viewed the school board position as the same thing. You know, we have an extremely talented central office staff, and we have an extremely talented staff throughout the district, right? And the school board's job is to rely on those folks and to provide governance, you know. So the school board's job is to hire the best superintendent we can. And if John is not the best person, right, you have the best superintendent there. And you rely on the fact that it goes down from there, and you provide governance across the district. So I think I, like all of you, had an experience where a teacher would come to me and say, wow, this thing's terrible, like the outrage, right? Or a community member, this thing's horrible, this is the worst teacher ever. Or principals or assistant principals, and you say, that's great, like I hear what you're saying, like, did you talk to your classroom teacher? Did you talk to your principal? Did you talk to the superintendent, right? Like, there's a process for it. And I think that gets lost very quickly, and it's really important to have a consistent thread where there's a system, follow the system, like, right? And if you exhaust that, like, come to us. Like, let us be, like, we're here. But follow the path, and support the path. Like, hire good people, rely on good people.
Can I get you to come give that speech to some of the school boards?
Anybody you want, absolutely, no, for sure. I would do that. My billable hours really pretty reasonable too, so I mean, but.
What do you see as challenges regarding equity in our district, and maybe a couple of suggestions for dealing with those challenges?
That's a good one. So, equity is an interesting thing that we're dealing with right now, by and large. So, once again, like going back to my professional life. So, I spent the last 7 years developing affordable housing. Right, so that gives you the opportunity as a real estate person to deal with people in communities that are different than we normally deal with. And we have now actually segued into saying this affordable housing tax credit thing, it doesn't work anymore, like the way that what we're trying to do. And so we've segued into a different product type, really trying to go even deeper into communities. And that experience professionally has afforded me the benefit of dealing across communities in a way a lot of people don't have the benefit of doing. Because I build very expensive, like high-end products, and I like build products for people that, you know, are in Section 8 housing, right? And so it gives you the benefit of really this very broad dialogue, which is a huge asset, quite frankly. And I think it's easy from an outside lens to look at somewhere like Webster, where really you look at it and like the person who's worst off in Webster is better off than a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world. Like, right? That's true. Like, but we have to look like in the cosm of what's happening here. Like, right? Like, if we want to provide an opportunity for kids across our district that makes sense, what does that really look like? So I've actually gone to several of the meetings in North Webster that they, with the Housing Coalition and with what they're trying to do to address issues in North Webster. And it's things that, like, we've lived here a long time and we don't know, like, right? Like, there's a lot of history there. The first was a school board. I tell people this pretty often. I was just sitting in a meeting and someone came to a meeting. It's an older woman who said, but you guys have to like understand, like when I was a child in this district, it was a segregated pool, like, right? Like, that's like my lifetime. Like, it was like not like something I read in like, I didn't see in a documentary. Like, and like, right, you go, oh, like, you know, you probably, that informed you raising your children and your grandchildren in your house and trying to understand that. And it's really, it's been pretty transformative, like really trying to think through that. And so, like having conversations with people throughout the district, just kind of in a social scale around redistricting, has been super interesting, you know? And people come back to, like, we want to create this equitable thing. And people kind of will sometimes go, we want equity, right? We want equity and equity. So what's that really mean to you? Like, what does that experience really mean? And then we further that, we've been having conversations with people like, whether private schools, like what does private school really mean? Like when you look in the context of equity, and I think it's honestly, it's super hard. And I think that it's an easy buzzword that people like to like have a 30-second soundbite to like really sound high and mighty about. Because like no, it's like, let's stop. Like let's peel it back and like really have a conversation, like, right? Because the equity of my situation is different than yours. And like, how do we try to create a situation for our kids that's not just in the classroom, like it's extracurricular. It's the biggest thing the foundation is struggling with right now, like, right? You know, you look at equity across what we're trying to do for people, it's super hard. I think quite frankly, the biggest step forward we could take is like having open, candid conversations about it where we go like, maybe it's not equitable right now. And what does equity really mean and how do we really address it? So I would say, long-winded answer, the fact that we're asking the question and engaging in dialogue with stakeholders puts us so far above most people. Because most people are like, oh no, this is totally equitable, it's great, and it's really not. So I don't know what the solution is. I think that having the conversation is the right step in addressing it.
Thank you.
Super long-winded, I apologize. You could take that on my 5 minutes.
Is there a particular issue about which you are passionate that you would try to address in your time on the board?
Absolutely not. And I think anybody that says yes should be like asked to leave. I mean, I think the biggest problem that you run into is, and we've all seen it, like if you come into this with an agenda, you're not the right person. You know, unless your agenda is providing good governance for the school district. So if I like need to choose an answer, good governance for the district is my agenda. No, it's super scary, like, right? I don't ever want to be the smartest guy in the room, ever in my entire life. Mainly because my wife is usually that person. No, there's absolutely not. I think that providing governance and support to what the district is going to do should be 7 people in this body, that should be the deal. Like if you have an agenda, you should just see yourself out. I just bought some time back.
Sufficient. All right, other questions anyone would like to ask?
I'll ask my other secondary question, just because I think it's an interesting question. How do you think public education today is different than when you were in school?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. So I grew up in St. Louis City for most of my education. So my parents chose to send me to private school, mainly because they wanted to afford me the ability to learn how to read, because St. Louis City schools back then were not great. Liz, my wife, grew up in Overland Park, Kansas, which when she was going through schools, the district she was in was the #3 public district in the country. Like it was better than anything. So when we got married, like it was this like huge dichotomy of, she thought public schools were the greatest thing. I was like, well, public schools are real bad. Like you don't want that, right? And we chose to move to Webster very early because she's now been in the district for 18 years. So she got her job right out of college was in Webster. And it's just such a great resource. And St. Louis is is so strange. I mean, it's just, we have so many wonderful things going on, but so many challenges. And I think we get bogged down in the difficulty. Like, our issues are so big, like, right, we don't know how to address them. And quite frankly, what nobody ever says is like city-county unification. It's like an insurmountable problem, and schools are at the heart of it. So our issues here are so much broader than other places. I think we're so fortunate to be in a public school district that is so supportive of our teachers and our kids and really so open-minded. That's super fortunate. I've loved being involved here over the years. It's just been wonderful. I just think we have to figure out how do we continue to provide the best possible environment for students and for teachers. You know, something we talk about often at the foundation, and this is really super difficult and we haven't figured it out, is when we're talking to people, how do we sell the district? We want your support to make the optics to be that we compete with any private district, any private school in St. Louis, right? I'd argue we do. You know, we provide amazing opportunities. But how you sell that is really hard. I quite frankly tell people they should maybe homeschool their kids, right? Like, get kids out of school, because their dollars per kid goes up, right? But how you really do that's a challenge. I think we're really blessed in the environment we're in. So I'm not sure if that answered your question. What else can I give you guys?
Do you have any questions for us?
I mean, I'd say you guys were really tasked with a tough spot with this vacancy, so I just acknowledge that, like, in the middle of, you guys are bogged down with a lot of stuff. Like, I have a lot of empathy for where you're at with everything else that's going on. So I think you guys, you know, handled this in a very open and transparent way, which is good. I think that rebuilding, you know, trust with everybody in the community is really important. So I appreciate that none of you want to be here at 8 or 7:40 on a Friday night, you know, but it's the commitment of the position. And I think you guys really went above and beyond to try to do this in the most kind of transparent way possible. And if I can serve as a resource to the district, that's why I'm here. Like, I'm an open book. And I really just want to be a resource if I can provide that to what you guys are trying to do. So
Right.
I can do a little dance if you want.
No,
If that would be
yes, no,
helpful.
I-
No dancing.
Hands
Okay.
dancing.
I was gonna say yes.
I think the Robert's rules say the president gets to choose if there's dancing or no
No
dancing.
dancing allowed.
Anything else I can tell you guys?
I don't think so, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joel.
You're so cold.
I'm in here.
I like ice.
It's chilly.
I didn't even wear a coat to work yesterday.
Third candidate,
To work yesterday. So I took one with me. Right. I know. I took
Yeah.
one with
What do you?
Just-
I know.
I was gonna-
I was like, is that a good question?
I'm gonna go with grandpa.
I'll just say, how'd you vote for property? It's an easy answer, right?
I was on the fence.
I considered it.
I took a leaf out of my friends in Chicago's books. 8 times I voted.
Right,
All
exactly.
in favour. Yes.
Right.
Oh, wait, that's being recorded. I didn't say that.
Do we have a record of who listens to this? Or if anyone listens to it?
I know of one,
Okay, all right, well, good, as long as,
just because of questions that have come.
well, good. Somebody's listening.
Each time,
Typically
I don't
me,
know.
I just like
Is
to
it
listen
you?
to it the next.
So she must
You
have.
like your radio voice?
Uh-huh.
Excellent.
All right, did you say the third person is here or is not?
I don't know.
She
I'm guessing
is.
so.
We think so? Oh, yeah,
There
he
it
is.
is. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Brian.
Hi, Brian. I'm Amy Clendenin. I'm the school board president. We'll take just a second to introduce ourselves to you. Go ahead, David.
Let ladies go first.
Oh, sure. My name's Christine Keller.
Sure.
Nice to meet you.
And Joe Dahl?
Keita Quinn.
Alex Kahn?
I'm David Addison.
So how this process is going to work is we're each going to ask you a question, and we've been asking all of the candidates the same question. I am going to we've been doing a 20-minute time limit on everybody. So we'll go around and ask you a question, and then if time permits, we may ask a follow-up question or an additional question. And then we'll also leave 5 minutes or so at the end in case you have questions for us.
Okay, great.
All right? Okay.
So I have a two-part question. Part one is just what challenges do you think the district is facing right now? And part two, what suggestions do you have to address those?
I know that the increase in student body has been something that is concerned, that's even dealt with the redistricting of the grade schools. And I do think that that is something that, while I was sending an email, they did not axe to grind. That is not, I bring it up in the sense that that is something that should be looked at in terms of how we are attempting to make sure that all students have access to neighborhood schools that they feel a connection to in the community, and not simply just trying to put pieces where they can be. So I do think that with that growth of the student population, that is a large concern, because that can mean that there is more of a disconnect for students, and especially that idea, that sense of what brought me to this district was that idea of the community, and hopefully trying to find ways in which students feel like they are part of their neighborhood community and connected with their school population for that. So that's one of my major things that I would like to see addressed, is how do we have students feel like they are connected to their actual school. If you look at the map, the redistricting that puts students in Edgar who are actually across 44 from it, that is to be blunt, that is a concern to me, because is for whose benefit is that integration for? And is that serving the needs of the entire student population for those students who don't feel that connection to the neighborhood school, because they simply cannot walk to school? And additionally, that would impact their attendance as well. So would it hurt attendance issues for those students simply because they do not have access to that neighborhood school that other students do have?
Thank you.
Thanks. What's your primary reason for wanting to serve on the board?
Twofold. My wife and I are both educators, and when we were shopping for homes, first and foremost on the list was Webster Groves School District. So Rock Hill, Webster Groves. Primarily because of what Webster Groves produced as far as that idea of learning for all. What we saw and what impressed us by it is that attention to all students, that there was success and achievement for students of all walks of life. And that was something that spoke to us as parents, that we held in high esteem and high regard. So that is something that I do hope to continue and want to be a part of as a part of the community, is being a voice to ensure that Webster Groves' commitment to equity in education, as well as that learner-centered focus in education, is still prominent. Now, speaking more specifically as an educator, as I have grown in my studies and things, and when looking at it through the lens that I currently have now, and if you look at the spheres of influence for a school district, starting outwards from, I would say, all shareholders that we would represent as the school board, at the heart of it is that student. So as we move in from those spheres from us to the students, we're going to hit the superintendent, our school, building level administration, and then the teachers. So it's at the teachers have the most connection with those students and are the ones that are truly doing that work for learner-centered focus and equity. Now, as an educator who spent 14 years in the classroom, I offer up that unique perspective where while I hope to gain insight from those outer spheres, the idea of the shareholder from the school board, I want to be able to bring my vision and what I've seen in this classroom to that. Additionally, as I've kind of developed more of my lens of what curriculum is and what we should be striving for, I've seen myself move more from the learner-centered vision into something of more of a social reconstructionist. As we talk about in Webster Grove's vision, trying to prepare students for success in the world, well, are we preparing them for success, or what is the purpose of education? Is it to prepare them for the world as it is and maintain the status quo, or should we be trying to achieve a better world, a world of that truly social reconstruction? Are we addressing certain inequities and injustices in the classroom, in what we're doing, to helpfully prepare students for making the world actually better than what it currently is? So that idea of social reconstructionist curriculum thinking, that I'm moving more towards, drives me to throw my hat in the ring here, so to speak, is hopefully being able to help the Webster Grove School District continue its learner-centered focus, but also looking at it as something that can hopefully be moving forward to what the world should be, and not simply as what it is.
Thank you.
Thanks. Brian, what personal strengths or talents do you think you would contribute as a member of the Board of Education?
One of the key aspects of my instruction in the classroom is dialogic learning. By that I mean dialogue. Ultimately, while my talk is my own original thinking, my utterances don't occur without response to someone else. And this is, I guess, ultimately a long-winded way of saying collaboration and communication are two essential skills that I possess that are really hallmarks of both my instruction, but also just my personality. I'm much more of a person who thrives in the collaborative atmosphere and hearing multiple diverse perspectives that hopefully can lead it to some degree of compromise, or at least seeing where we come from. Additionally, I've always been complimented by my wife about being able to see the big picture, having a vision for what we want to achieve and how we move towards that has been something of a strength of my own. Okay, so that working with the team, as well as that idea about being able to see a bigger picture and hopefully kind of work towards that, is ultimately two things that I feel are strengths that I possess as a person. Additionally, I would say finally that my advocacy for public education is something that I do feel is a strength that I would bring to the team, that knowing what actual public education looks like in the classroom setting is something that, and just actually knowing if you can manage a classroom of 15-year-old hormonal teenagers and recognize, well, this is what public education needs to be, this is what we should be looking for, that's something that I do bring to the table that I do feel is a strength.
How would you describe the relationship between a school board member and either a staff member or a school administrator?
So with that idea about understanding the big picture, what I would envision it being is that the school board would be ultimately trying to devise policies that are hopefully trying to be best for all learners. And at that point in time, it would be the necessity for the school board member to communicate those policies to a building level administrator or any administrator, hopefully to help them with the implementation and management of those district needs as we've set forth. So what that would sound like or look like would be that those decisions that are guided by the board would then it'd be required of us to communicate those, but then also the reciprocity would be that the administrators wouldn't necessarily be having to oversee the measurement of those policies. So while we are constructing policies, how to achieve the success and what would be determining as success would have to be something that would be looked at as measurement from the people at the administrative level. So part of that measurement would be to determine what the goals are, ideally at with a communication between the administrators and the school board, but then that sort of measurement would then come from the administration.
Thanks.
What do you see as challenges regarding equity in our district, and what are a couple of suggestions you may have for dealing with those challenges?
Currently, what I've noticed and what jumped out at me as far as equity was that stood out to me as raising my antenna was in the information provided on the website was one thing that I noticed was the offering up of a college credit African American literature course in hopes of attracting minorities to the African American literature, or giving students exposure to African American literature. That seems to put it into a box, and that as an educator, that makes me question or wonder what then does African American or other minority perspectives look like in all the classrooms, or even in the curriculum. So as I try to strive and push for more, under the social reconstructionist lens, for multiplicity and inclusion, that makes me wonder, what does a history class look like? Does the history curriculum only have a paragraph on racial covenants in housing? Or does it actually have a fuller view of those equity issues that are presented throughout history, that illustrates that this idea of inequity and injustice isn't just something that's encapsulated with just not having black voices in the classroom, focusing on the dead white man canon, but how do we see it as being something that's instilled in students from the get-go, that these sort of issues are present in many things. On that front, or just on that idea alone, is we also look at talking about in the literature of the achievement gap, and looking at how we address the achievement gap. One thing that I noted in it is that it seemed the materials that I see is concerning about being one-dimensional, and not really being looked at in terms of something that historian James Anderson noted, that some of this achievement gap language, that even just the language alone presents African American or minority students at a deficiency, and it normalizes white perspectives. So that language alone means we're immediately speaking about minority voices as that they're deficient, and that's concerning to me, and doesn't address and recognize the achievements of minority students. From 1970 to 2007, reading scores for white students raised 7%. For African American students, 33%. So there is some concern there from me as an educator who would want to see a little bit more of a progressive view of or more holistic view of the inequities that are presented in the classroom. I see some of the language and viewpoint as something that is concerning to me, and my suggestions would be some of the stuff that I said, is like, how are we seeing it in the curriculum? How are we presenting African American experience or experience in minorities in a more holistic way? that recognizes all the obstacles that have been presented, like racial covenants in housing, not simply just a something that attributes it to a deficiency in their upbringing or in social environment. And I would be really curious to get a little bit more in depth on what is occurring in the classrooms and in the curriculum to really give a little bit more in-depth answer, to be honest. I'd really be like, that would be something as far as one of my strengths and curiosities would be what I would like to have this position to be able to do that in. I did note during the Webster Groves open house, when I asked this question of the assistant principal, the answer was somewhat short, is that we're trying to get all voices into it, but I didn't really hear something about what are some specifics that are occurring in the building to address equity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. At this point, do you have questions for us?
Yes, I'm so new with this. I was so focused on trying to prepare good answers for you guys. I guess my biggest question would be how, if I were chosen, how would I be rolled into the duties that are being vacated? I know and I'm forthright, I am an educator, and I'm not going to be so cliche as to make the joke that, well, I teach English, I'm not math, but I would need to do a lot of research and learning as far as financial decisions. I mean, I know how to make a budget for a family of four, but this is something that entirely different. So what would happen next?
So fortunately, we rely on our CFO for the financial information. Of course, we read it and ask questions if we have them, but the math part of it is really not within the scope of our responsibility. Okay. So yeah, for me too. Also an English major, Truman alum.
And we have David.
So, and then in terms of this, sort of relates to a question another candidate had, which is we all serve on various committees.
Yes.
We don't all try to do everything. We
Yes.
divide them by areas of interest. So David does the finance committee because
Okay.
And we established
he's
this
a nerd,
already.
yes. And so, and also I think it will be important for whomever is in the role to meet with John right away and get to know him and his staff and understand what they do. As board president and vice president, David and I would of course sit with you and talk about, board issues and things that are ongoing and try to get you up to speed as much as possible.
Okay. Great.
Anything else?
No, that's it. I think I'm okay. Good.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you,
Thank you
Brian.
very
Nice
much.
to meet you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay.
Brian, if you have to leave though, I told all the candidates that I would call them if they're not here when the processing takes place and the decision's made.
Oh,
But you're
yes.
welcome to stay.
Okay.
Yeah. Unlike any interview any of us have been in before.
I know.
Our
This
experience.
is all public session,
All right.
so
Yeah.
open to the public.
That's different.
Wait till they get in and then we'll talk about next steps. Thank you, Pam.
I'll pass out how many of these take.
I would pass out one
One
to each person.
One each person for now.
And I'll explain to everybody else in a second. How was the hospitality room? Did they at least have snacks or anything?
Yeah, that would be.
It was perfect. All right, does anybody have anything that they want to say at this point before I go through what I'm going to propose as the process for making this decision? Other than thank you all for your interest, and obviously you're all,
Yeah, very.
we had 8 applicants and you guys rose to the top, so, and they were all excellent, so you should be proud of yourselves. Okay, so what I am proposing that we do at this point is, You have a piece of paper. Write your name on the top of the paper, and then write your first choice with a 1, your second choice with a 2, your third choice with a 3. I am not going to vote at this time in case there is a tie. If I get a majority of first place, for instance, if I get 4 first place, 4 people, oops, my timer's still going, 4 people pick the same person, then I will say, based on the scoring of the board members, I make a motion to appoint that person. And so then you will all know that somebody had a clear majority.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? And if no one has a clear majority, if there are, let's say, 3 in favor of one person, and I would also rank that person first, then I will vote for that person, and I would go ahead and make the motion. Everybody good? Okay. So send them over.
It's all public anyway, so don't fold it in.
Back and forth.
Right. You're supposed to fold it. Pretty.
Tuck it, fold it.
Okay, we do not have a majority. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go ahead and write my votes down at this point. So, you want to talk about the point system, David?
So it's not a point system, but the way we talked about before was that we look at everybody's first preferences. If somebody has 4, which clearly they don't, then that one person will get elected. If not, then we'd look and see who had the least number of first preference votes, and that would go to their second choice. So if one person had let's say somebody had voted for, for Joel, and Joel that was the only person who voted for him, then you'd go to that person's second choice. You'd then treat that as though it's a first place. So therefore, what we need to know is how many votes, how many first place votes each person got.
So we have 2 people. 1, 2, 3. It's tied.
2, 2, 2.
3, 3.
Okay, so in that case, so the person who got no first place votes then is eliminated at this
Okay.
point. Okay.
And then,
So there's nothing actually there's nothing to reallocate at that point. So what I would suggest in that case is that we then, with the 2 people that are left, we go back and we vote again. If it's still tied
it's
at
going
3,
to, based on how everybody ranked, it's going to be tied.
that fine. I would then, at which point I would suggest then that we have a conversation in terms of what we think the strengths are, what we think that the needs are, and then we'll see if we can come to a consensus. That would be, and at some point if it's tied at 3, basically we're going to end up picking a name out of the hat, which
No,
clearly
we're
is
not going to do that.
which is clearly not inadequate,
Yeah,
and
no.
not. But at some point when you're tied at 3, eventually you have to do something else.
Or we don't make a decision tonight.
Okay, all right, okay. So if that's one of the available alternatives, then absolutely, okay.
There's nothing that says we have to make a decision tonight. There's nothing that says we have to even fill the position. So I would rather all of us feel good about it than pick a name out of a hat.
Okay.
I'd agree.
So at this point, I'm just going to share that the person who is eliminated at this time is going to be Brian. I'm sorry. So thank you. And so Aaron and Joel are tied with 3 first place votes apiece. Would anyone like to advocate for either of those candidates?
Do you want to do a vote again in case anybody's changed their mind?
So Aaron and Joel are either first or last on.
Okay, all right, okay, it doesn't sound like it's going to change.
No,
All right,
yeah,
okay,
I don't think anything's going to change.
all right.
So,
I think talking about it, I don't think it's a bad idea to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like you said, giving people
Sure.
a chance to speak about it.
Want to just go around, have everybody
so,
make it.
yes, would somebody, yeah, why do, whoever, I think all of you put either Joel or Aaron first, so why?
Yeah.
I'll go first. I remember our discussion about what we were looking for in the candidate, and one of the things was that we knew their priorities and that their interests were aligned with the board interest and mission. And then also that they would bring a skill set and knowledge similar to Arnold's, as well as having an ability to get up to speed quickly. And for those reasons, I can say who I voted for, right? Because I'm advocating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do believe Aaron brings a skill set similar to Arnold, has had kids in the school for over 18 years, is interested in equity and can speak about it. And I believe that she would be able to get up to speed quickly, is asking good questions, has served on the strategic planning committee, and I thought she was a really strong candidate.
Anybody want to speak let's stick with Aaron. Anybody want to speak in favor of Aaron?
I will. I can almost say ditto to what Christine said. The other thing, just in reading her resume, that impressed me was her work and concern with mental health issues. And also, I just got more of a feel for her interest in well-being of students. And so that's, I think, what impressed me a bit more than the others for me.
Yeah, and I would say, likewise, I was just trying to think through the criteria, really being, the experience in education and that background, on top of, I thought her responses to some of the issues with the district, kind of thinking a little bit more long-term and bigger picture, I felt like. So I liked her response to that, and that kind of aligned with her passions and her career, quite frankly. So I thought, I thought she was the most qualified.
Anyone want to speak to Joel? Obviously, we know who the three are.
So I will. So for me, this comes down. This is a 4-month vacancy. Yes, whoever fills this position, absolutely, they may have, if they choose to run. And so one of the things you have to remember is whether they choose to run. But they may have an advantage if they choose to run. Although I will tell you, incumbency hasn't. I've managed to get re-elected, but it's, only by the skin of my teeth, it seems. So I think for me, the key is somebody who can get up to speed very quickly in a short period of time. I think if I look at the answers that Erin gave, I think wonderful answers, and I think in terms of a long-term sort of board member, somebody who would sort of serve out a full term, I think she'd do an outstanding job. I think she's very, very well suited. But I think that we need to look at our immediate need now, which is to get up to speed quickly. It's to deal with issues that we have right now that need the board to address. And so, to me, Joel's experience there is very important. And frankly, the other thing, I can't fail but to take into account that when Joel was not re-elected to the board, he then went and started working for the foundation. He's remade the foundation. I mean, the foundation is it's handing out grants left, right, and centre. It is bringing money into the district. It's bringing money in for all of the students. in terms of, obviously equity in education is something that's very important to this board. It's been part of our mission for a long time. The work that Joel's done with the foundation to go and remodel that is helping put that vision into process. And so I think just in terms of being able to get up to speed, in terms of having been choosing to be heavily involved for as long as he has, I believe that Joel is the better of the two candidates.
And I concur almost exactly. I think there's no substitute for experience, and I think we have a big issue on the table that's going to come before the April election. So to have someone that has that experience and will essentially have no learning curve is invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think I like that he comes with no issue, no one area that he's pressed to take care of. He's just here to serve the students and make the district better.
Mm-hmm. So I have never met Aaron, I've never met Brian. Obviously, I've worked with Joel, and he's, I'll be candid, one of the best board members I've ever worked with. He's outstanding. That aside, Aaron was one of my top, I think Brian, I don't remember if Brian was also, but one of the people that I scored highest after looking at the initial batch of resumes because of her experience with public education, because of her, and you guys know how passionate I am about special education and advocating for kids with special needs, and so that really, but at the end of the day, and you may have noticed that my questions were very much geared toward what's the role of a school board member versus what's the role of a teacher or an administrator or a community member, and Aaron's answers were great answers for committee members, for advocates, for people doing the day-to-day work. But the work that we do as board members isn't that, and we can certainly all share those values, but in terms of what this job looks like, I think that Joel's explanation of we govern, that's what we do, and that's the only thing that I'm interested in doing here is helping to govern the school district. So that's where I am. So I think at this point, now that we have two, let's rank them again and see where we can at. Does anybody want to say anything else? Okay. Yep. Confused. Okay, so we're still tied. So I'm going to suggest that we not make this decision this evening. Anybody? Okay. All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second? All right, all those.
Motion there, second here.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks. Thanks again to you guys for being here. We've never done this before, as you can tell, we're kind of winging it.
May I approach?
Sure. Oh, I like that. I feel like a judge. May I?
Yeah, she's actually now over.
I'm all for
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, just-
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And what happened? Okay, and what's behind that?
Yes.
Well, I don't think anybody was going to change their mind, and I'm not comfortable with
Yes.